Ethan knew the evening would be uneventful long before he stepped through the sliding glass doors of the community center. The annual charity mixer was something he attended more out of obligation than enthusiasm, and tonight was no different. He moved through the crowd with a polite nod here and a half smile there, keeping his hands tucked into his pockets as if hiding his disinterest. He wasn't unhappy to be there, he was simply tired of pretending everything in his life was fine. His relationship with Mark had become an arrangement of silence and unspoken resentment. They shared a home, a schedule, and sometimes a dinner plate, but warmth was scarce. Mark, always absorbed in his career as a financial analyst, seemed to drift farther away with each passing month. At first Ethan tried to fill the gaps with patience and understanding, believing the distance was temporary. But after years of late nights, cancelled plans, and half-hearted apologies, he began to wonder if it was him who was no longer seen. That thought lingered as Ethan excused himself from a dull conversation and stepped outside to breathe. The night air was cool and strangely comforting. He pulled out his phone, hoping for a message from Mark, anything to signal he still mattered, but the screen was empty. He sighed, reminding himself not to expect what wasn't offered. When he returned inside, his coworker Jenna waved him over with her usual lively energy. "We're heading out for drinks," she said. "A little bar on the edge of town. You should come." Ethan hesitated. He rarely joined after-work outings. He was usually eager to go home in hopes of catching Mark before he fell asleep at his desk. But tonight, the idea of sitting in that quiet apartment felt even more suffocating than forced small talk. "Sure," Ethan said, surprising even himself. "Why not?" 20 minutes later, Ethan found himself pushing open the heavy wooden door of a bar he'd never visited. Warm amber light spilled over the room, illuminating walls decorated with faded cowboy hats and antique photographs. The place felt rustic, a little rough around the edges but welcoming in a way the mixer never could be. Jenna and the others ordered a round of drinks, but Ethan, feeling restless, stepped aside to survey the room. Only a few people occupied the space, most lost in low conversations or swaying softly to the country song playing through old speakers. That's when he noticed someone sitting at the end of the counter, a man wearing a weathered brown jacket, a wide-brimmed hat resting beside his drink. His posture was relaxed, his expression warm, as if he was perfectly at home in the dim glow of the bar. Ethan didn't mean to stare, but something about the stranger's calm presence pulled his attention like a magnet. The man caught Ethan's eye and offered a polite smile, gentle, unassuming, inviting without being forward. Ethan looked away quickly, pretending to study the worn wood floor, but a strange flutter stirred in his chest. A moment later, Jenna nudged him. "We're heading outside for a smoke," she said. "You staying here?" "Yeah," Ethan replied, still unsettled by the unexpected moment of eye contact. "I'll wait inside." As the door closed behind her, Ethan found himself standing alone with the quiet hum of the bar around him. Before he could decide what to do next, a voice broke through the silence. "You look like you could use a drink." Ethan turned. The cowboy-looking stranger had approached, holding out a fresh glass. Up close, he seemed even more striking, defined features softened by a sincere expression, eyes carrying an easy warmth. "I'm cold," he said. "Mind if I sit?" Ethan swallowed, hoping the surprise didn't show too clearly. "I'm Ethan. And, no, I don't mind." Colt took a seat, resting his forearm on the counter. "You seemed a little out of place," he said gently. "Figured company might help." Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "It might," he admitted. They spoke casually, about music, about the town, about nothing particularly significant, yet every exchange felt strangely grounding. Colt listened with a level of attentiveness Ethan hadn't felt in months. His presence was steady, unhurried, and unexpectedly comforting. When Jenna and the group returned, Ethan realized he hadn't checked the time once. Hours seemed to pass without notice. As he stood to leave, Colt offered a simple nod. "Take care, Ethan." Ethan stepped into the night feeling lighter and heavier all at once. He didn't understand why a casual drink felt like the start of something he wasn't prepared for. Later, as he unlocked his car, his phone buzzed with a new message, from Colt. "Just checking, you get home safe." Ethan stared at the screen, heart thudding. The story, he realized, was only beginning. Ethan didn't respond to Colt's message right away. He sat in his parked car, the darkness around him feeling oddly intimate, as though the night expected an answer he wasn't ready to give. The message was simple, kind, even, but it carried a gravity that unsettled him. After a long minute, he typed back, "Made it home. Thanks for checking." Colt replied almost instantly with a modest, "Glad to hear." No questions. No assumptions. Just reassurance. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself revisiting that brief exchange. The gentleness behind Colt's words lingered in his thoughts like a quiet echo. He didn't want to admit it, but his life felt slightly less heavy knowing someone had thought to check on him. Mark, meanwhile, moved through their apartment like a man made of deadlines and exhaustion. He left early, returned late, and seemed more tethered to his laptop than to any human being. Ethan tried to spark small conversations, mentioning the mixer, hinting at his growing feelings of isolation, but Mark offered little more than distracted nods. It wasn't cruelty, it was neglect born from routine and ambition. Still, it stung. One evening, after Mark collapsed into bed without saying goodnight, Ethan sat in the living room, staring at the dim glow of the streetlights outside. He felt forgotten, like a placeholder in his own relationship. Almost without thinking, he picked up his phone and typed a message to Colt. "Long day. Hope you're doing all right." He nearly deleted it twice, but before he could change his mind, Colt responded with a cheerful, "Doing okay. You?" And so it began. Their conversations grew gradually, like vines creeping over neglected walls. What started as quick check-ins soon became longer exchanges. Colt asked questions Mark hadn't bothered to ask in years. How was work? Was Ethan sleeping well? What made him smile lately? Ethan answered honestly, surprised by how natural vulnerability felt with a man he barely knew. Colt never pried. He never pushed. He simply listened, responding with thoughtful messages that made Ethan feel seen instead of tolerated. Their nightly texts became a soft ritual, one Ethan looked forward to more than he wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks. Mark's absence deepened, while Colt's presence, though entirely digital, felt increasingly vivid. Ethan tried to convince himself the connection was harmless, but he recognized the truth. He was forming an emotional bond that belonged inside his relationship, not outside it. But he didn't stop. One Friday afternoon, Colt messaged him unexpectedly, "Heading out to the lake later. Good spot to clear the mind. You should come if you need a break." Ethan stared at the invitation, heart thumping. He knew what going would mean, not in a romantic sense, but emotionally. It would be choosing comfort elsewhere instead of working on the fractured quiet at home. Still, something inside him whispered that he needed clarity, not confinement. That he typed, "Where should I meet you?" The lake was quiet when Ethan arrived, the water reflecting streaks of orange and gold from the setting sun. Colt stood by the shoreline, hands in his pockets, looking completely at ease in the open space. "I'm glad you came," Colt said with sincerity that struck Ethan more deeply than it should have. They walked slowly along the bank, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes. Their conversation drifted effortlessly, from childhood memories to frustrations at work to the feeling of navigating life without a guide. Colt spoke with refreshing honesty, never embellishing or holding back, and his words grounded Ethan in a way he hadn't felt in years. At one point, Ethan paused, staring over the water. "Do you ever feel like you're just fading in someone else's life?" he asked quietly. Colt nodded. "Yeah. It's hard when you're giving everything you've got, and it still feels invisible." The empathy in his voice broke something loose inside Ethan. He didn't cry dramatically or fall apart, but he felt the sharp swell of emotion he'd kept trapped for too long. Colt didn't move closer or touch him, he simply stood beside him, offering steady presence instead of pressure. As the sky shifted into deeper shades of blue, Ethan realized he wasn't just opening up, he was leaning. Leaning into someone new, someone gentle, someone who noticed him without expectation. The drive home was silent, but not empty. Ethan felt the weight of the bracelet Colt had given him, a simple rope braid, as a grounding reminder of the connection that had formed. When he slipped it onto his wrist, he felt a quiet shift inside himself. Not a betrayal in action, but a betrayal and feeling. By the time he pulled into his driveway, Ethan understood the truth he had been avoiding, that he wasn't just talking to Colt, that he was falling for him, and that realization left him breathless, conflicted, and deeply unsure of what came next. The bracelet was the first thing Mark noticed. It lay on the corner of Ethan's desk, braided rope catching the morning light like a quiet confession. Mark picked it up, turning it between his fingers with a puzzled expression. When Ethan walked into the room, Mark looked up, not angry, but searching. "Whose is this?" he asked. The question, simple as it was, struck Ethan like a blow. He hesitated, pulse quickening. There was no easy way to soften the truth. "It's Colt's," Ethan said. "A friend I've been spending time with." Mark didn't explode. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, a subtle tension tightened his jaw as he set the bracelet down. "Is there something I should know?" he asked, tone steady but heavy with apprehension. Ethan sat across from him, feeling the weight of weeks tugging at his chest. "I haven't cheated," he said honestly, "but I haven't been honest, either. I've been talking to him. A lot. More than I talk to you." Mark leaned back, exhaustion pooling in his eyes. "I figured something was off," he admitted. "But I didn't think there was someone else involved." "There shouldn't have been," Ethan murmured. "But I felt unseen, Mark. I felt alone." The room fell quiet, filled only by the ticking of the wall clock. Mark rubbed his temples, the movement slow and weary. "Ethan. I've been trying so hard to keep us afloat financially. I didn't realize I was losing you in the process." "I know," Ethan said. "And I don't blame you. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking. We stopped trying." Mark sighed, the sound soft but hollow. "So what happens now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He left the apartment instead, needing air, needing distance from the suffocating tension. He walked through the nearby park, the crisp wind brushing against his face. His mind replayed every moment with Colt, the laughter, the sincerity, the effortless warmth. Then it replayed every moment with Mark, the silence, the missed dinners, the emotional erosion, that he wasn't choosing between two men, that he was choosing between two versions of himself, one clinging to comfort, the other reaching for clarity. After nearly an hour of wandering, Ethan found himself driving without thinking. When he finally stopped, he was parked in front of Colt's ranch, an unplanned arrival that felt strangely inevitable. Colt stepped out of the barn when he heard the engine. His expression shifted instantly from surprise to concern. "Ethan? You okay?" Ethan swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. "Mark found the bracelet," he said quietly. "We talked." Colt approached slowly, giving Ethan space even as he offered his presence. "And how did it go?" "Painful," Ethan admitted. "Honest. Necessary." Colt nodded, his gaze steady. "Do you want to sit?" They sat on the wooden steps overlooking the field, watching horses graze in the distance. Ethan took a deep breath. "Colt. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't expect any of this. You came out of nowhere, and suddenly I feel awake. But it's confusing. And I don't want to hurt anyone, not Mark, not you." Colt looked down at his hands, then up again with quiet resolve. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently. "And I'm not here to take you from anyone. You just need to choose what makes sense for you." Ethan felt the sincerity settle into him like something warm and grounding. "I don't want to make a choice out of guilt," he said. "I want to make one out of truth." Colt offered a small smile. "Then take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Those words, steady, patient, unpressured, made Ethan's chest ache with something profound. Here was a man who didn't demand, didn't assume, didn't rush. Here was someone who simply stayed. When Ethan returned home later, the quiet in the apartment wasn't hostile. Mark sat at the table, eyes weary but open. "Did you get clarity?" he asked. Ethan sat down across from him. "I think so," he said softly. "We've been holding on to something that stopped working a long time ago. Neither of us wanted to admit it. Mark nodded slowly. Maybe it's time to let each other go. There was no anger, only acceptance, the kind that arrives after years of trying. They talked for hours, untangling their shared history with respect instead of bitterness. When they finally agreed to separate, it felt less like a failure and more like a release. Weeks later, after settling into his new routine, Ethan found himself back at Colt's ranch, not seeking escape, but seeking possibility. Colt greeted him with the same gentle steadiness that had drawn him in from the start. Ethan smiled, feeling ready, finally ready, for something honest.